Dungeons & Dragons is a game of heroes. One of the only games where you can make a character, play with your friends, and feel like heroes for a night. A great feeling of vanquishing the big bad evil guy, completing the quest, saving the town. The lore of D&D is very much like a long campaign. You have great heroes that are the subject of many books, like Drizzt, Mordekainen, and Elminster. But to have such great heroes, you need great villains. Most D&D players know the name Tasha. Tasha's Cauldron of Everything released in 5th edition as a recent book, written by Natasha the Dark. But not much is said or even known about Tasha. What most players playing the book don't even know is that Tasha is an alter ego, an alias, for the Mother of Witches. The writer and creator of the Demononomicon, a tome of demonic lore, the demonologist, Igwilv. This character has existed in all 5 editions of Dungeons & Dragons, being known or referred to as Igwilv, Tasha, and also Zybilna. Her exact appearance is unknown. Some describe the witch as a bald, hideous crone residing deep in forests and swamps. Others describe her as a ravishing beauty with raven hair. Igwilv's story is one of betrayal, rise to power, loss, more betrayal, and some toxic relationships, and perhaps a happy ending. And the beginning of that story starts all the way back in the original Dungeons & Dragons, before 1st edition. In the original version of D&D, Igwilv is described as a powerful archmage, male, who not much is known about them. But the character is quickly written off, saying that they were slain by the demon Grozd. It's not until 1st edition, when in the lost caverns of Sokanth, do we actually get an explanation of what happened in the original D&D book. It is cited that nearly a century ago, the Archmage Igwilv sent her evil minions to conquer the lands around her abode. She was successful, so successful that the marches of Perrinland were subjugated for a decade, and great indeed was the loot brought to Igwilv's lair in answer for her insatiable demands for treasure. Legend states that the Archmage gained much of her prowess from discovering the lost caverns of Sokanth, wherein was hidden magic of surpassed might. It is certain that Igwilv ruled her domain from these caverns. There she also conducted arcane experiments and rituals, trying to further increase her powers. Though these experiments were her downfall, for during one she accidentally freed the demon Grozd, whom she had imprisoned and forced into servitude. There was a terrible battle, and although the demon was forced to flee to the abyss, Igwilv was so stricken from the contest that her powers and strength were forever lost. With the wane of her evil, Igwilv's realm was sundered. Former henchmen and slaves stole her treasure and scattered to the 4 winds in the face of enemy armies. The Archmage, however, used the last of her power to prepare a hiding place in the caverns for her remaining wealth. Legends say that this included several tomes of great power. It is also mentioned that Igwilv is long dead, and that fact cannot be doubted. In this module, if the players do end up fighting the horde of Igwilv, they find her Demononomicon, the first mentioned of the legendary tome. It's described as a brass-bound book that contains a treatise on the powerful evil creatures of the lower planes. And so after 1st edition, it seems that she had a very quick and abrupt story, surely dying and leaving her extreme wealth and possessions behind, for those brave and dumb enough to seek it. In 2nd edition, we get more context to the story that 1st edition started, and in the book Return of the Eight, we get a brief glimpse into the family life of Igwilv. Tales of Igwilv's deeds have spread across the Flayness, making her an archetype for the sort of evil wizard conqueror that plagues its history, but not much is actually known about her. Even her physical appearance is a dispute. Igwilv first appeared in historical chronicles of Perrinland, and she was already known as an extremely powerful wizard and a master of fiend summoning and planar magic. At this point, she had already summoned and bound the demon lord Grozd and given birth to a son by him, Ayuz. Then, like we learned about in 1st edition, she did create her base from the lost caverns of Sokanth, but instead of failing, it is said that she was uninterested in the administration of her new lands, and so she stripped them of their treasures to support research into new magic. She eventually did release Grozd by accident, and fiercely battled him to a stalemate where he fled to the abyss. Igwilv was wounded and lost much of her power. Her armies disorganized and her treasures stolen, Many thought this was the end of Igwilv, and she spent a very long time regaining her powers, which she did, and then some, and since has made many attacks to attack Earth, gathering armies and attempting to march them in from other planes. Igwilv seemed to be obsessed with trying to recapture Grozd, who traveled back to the Abyss to do so, though she was imprisoned herself, and that imprisonment is the start of the module Return of the Eight. It is said that Grozd and Igwilv together fathered Ayuz the Evil, and out of hatred and spite, Grozd had imprisoned Igwilv, not killed. But eventually she was freed by a friend, Tourney, and from there Igwilv, Tourney, and Igwilv's son Ayuz made plans. At this point in the story, Igwilv is already an extremely powerful being, who has many contacts across the planes, and can easily gather a great army, setting up networks of gates and portals to bring troops to a staging area and open a single large gate. In fact, the players even have a chance to see the powerful witch, with a flash of lightning and an enormous crash of thunder immediately overhead startle you. The magical symbols on the courtyard stones flare, and a pillar of colored light forms, sparking the wet leaves of the surrounding forest with 1,000 reflections. A figure steps from the pillar, a slight woman with long black hair and golden skin. Her eyes are black pools with no irises or white. She is dressed in a dark gray robe with a hood. She bears no weapons. She soundlessly looks you over, and her lips cool with a contemptuous smile. This is Igwilv, and she merely observes the players. If she's attacked, she basically shrugs off anything that would hit her, and then she vanishes. This book just shows parts and pieces of the power and story of Igwilv, and in the end we get a slight conclusion to Igwilv and Ayuz's plans. Igwilv continues to support her son in his plans to conquer the Flaynus. Up to this point, none of her attacks on Earth have been successful, though she continues to try and dominate all other planes. It is said that Igwilv is powerful even by high-level D&D standards. Her super genius intelligence allows her to anticipate and counteract many events. She also develops many unusual spells, items, and monsters. And so, in the end of 2nd edition, they have set Igwilv up as a typical evil. Not much is known about her past, and the only times that we see her appearance is when she attempts to attack Earth. In 3rd edition, we get much of the same repeated lore. Her rise, fall, rise, back and forth relationship with demons, such as Grozd and her son Ayuz. But we also get more insight into her in the Demononomicon that she created. Igwilv, the Queen of Night, hails from the world of Greyhawk with powers on par with those of a quasi-deity. Many believe in her divine nature and worship Igwilv as the dark matron of sorcery. Some lore even hints that she is the issue of the witch Baba Yaga herself. As mother of the demigod Ayuz, she is the most infamous distaff member of a long roll of villains who relentlessly threaten Earth and many other worlds. Igwilv's first confirmed appearance was nearly 3 centuries ago, where the witch ensconced herself in a tower on the outskirts of a city, where she conducted her vile business, though she went too far and outraged the city eventually, and the people of the devout land saw her hounded from her stronghold in exile. Cast out, she eventually settled in the blossoming city of Greyhawk, where the mysterious lord and benefactor Zagig Ragern took the sorceress as an apprentice. Here, Igwilv learned of the denizens of the Outer Planes, their strengths, weaknesses, and together the mad wizard and feared witch audaciously succeeded in summoning and binding a demon lord, Fraz Urblu. Craving the power to accomplish this feat alone, Igwilv absconded with many of Zagig's creations, including his prized tome of Zix. Refining its arcane formulae, she renamed the tome with the infamous title, Demononomicon. And from here we know the rest of the story, where she summoned Grozd. And so, the famous Demononomicon does not seem like it was solely created by her. Instead, it was stolen and improved upon over time by the witch. It is said that there are 6 copies of this fell tome, each a lesser artifact. And while their contents differ, the power they possess are the same. A bearer of a copy of the Demononomicon casts all spells with the evil descriptor, as if they were 5 caster levels higher. The tome can even trap creatures inside of it, who are aware of their surroundings but cannot directly interact with them. Throughout 3rd edition, Egwilv continues to appear across many modules, stories, adventures, and lore. Most of the time she works in the background, extremely powerful but always cautious, sending or even tricking others to do difficult work, gathering armies, and proving her own powers, detailing more in her Demononomicon, though there is a very interesting interaction in one particular adventure. The players have the opportunity to meet Egwilv, and it is said that her initial attitude is unfriendly, though it is not that difficult to secure Egwilv's aid and convince her to help. If they fail, Egwilv just sends them away, but if they manage to charm her, Egwilv smiles, an expression at once both seductive and terrifying. She bids the PCs sit in nearby chairs, then asks them to recount in details the events that led them to this point. Once they are done, she nods and says this: "You are either very brave or very foolish. In either case, I sense the capacity for greatness in each of you. Had we met in a different time or under different circumstances, I would take action against you, crush you to paste, and destroy all you hold dear before you could approach a point where you might be able to someday hurt me. That day may yet come, I suppose, yet it is not today. I will help you, but know that opposing the Prince of Demons is not an idle choice. It is a choice that changes your life, your very existence, for what comes after. Things will never be the same for you, for me as well, I suspect, and so, while I will aid you, each of you owes me. I shall collect upon this debt at some point in the future, in a manner of my choosing. And if you refuse to honor our bargain, rest assured I'll enjoy extracting my price from your dying souls." She smiles sweetly, waves a hand, and tall glasses of fine wine appear in your hands. Now let us begin. Now, what we know about Egwilv to this point, this seems very odd. She has, after all, ruled nations as a tyrant, aided in flooding demons into the material plane and manipulated world events from behind the scenes for her own gain. Make no mistake, Egwilv is evil. Yet she also sees in this situation a chance to gain not only a powerful item within the story, but to also take action against a demon and shape the future of the Abyss. Though it is said if the PCs don't treat Egwilv with the proper fear and respect she deserves, she will give them a taste of her power. She'll probably stop at killing the entire party for the offensive acts for one PC, but she certainly has no qualms about murdering those who annoy her. This is a great insight into Egwilv as a character, and so at the end of 3rd edition, we have a slight glimpse into the personality of Egwilv and her background, maybe spawned from perhaps the most famous witch of all time, Baba Yaga, how she rose to power, and how she keeps herself there. In 4th edition, we get a lot for Egwilv, which details the entirety of the Demononomicon. The current lore we know is verified, and it is said her goal is nothing less than domination of the entire Abyss, and she knows more of that plane's secrets than any other being, living or otherwise. And we finally get a confirmation at her background. She is the adopted daughter of the witch Baba Yaga. Throughout the Demononomicon, we see Egwilv's thoughts as she writes in her own ideas into the history and lore of the Abyss. And we finally get an insight into the relationship between her and Grozd, which has been described mildly as a love-hate relationship. She writes, "For all his enticing qualities, Grozd is simply a tool in my hands. I am not foolish enough to believe that the deceitful Dark Prince ever truly loved me. Decades of imprisonment and lingering scars are proof enough of that. Even so, his conquest coincides with my own plans." We also get a tiny glimpse into just one of the many plans that Egwilv has to dominate the Abyss. And one of those plans is Kostchi. Kostchi is called the Prince of Wrath for his destructive rages. Once a mighty frost giant lord and conqueror of vast stretches of the elemental chaos, Kostchi is driven to destroy by a near mindless hatred. He has slain several demon lords, and only his limited intellect has prevented him from spreading destruction across the Abyss. It is said that Kostchi is merely a pawn in a much larger game. It was Egwilv who set the Frost Giant King along his path to demonhood, and continues to manipulate him. With her subtle guidance, Kostchi grows more powerful as he wages war against other demon lords. If he ever succeeds in conquering the Abyss, Egwilv stands ready to snatch away the fruits of his victory. Egwilv granted Koschei 2 gifts, the mighty Maul of Brutal Endings, and the cacodemon essence of a slain fiend whose intellect she had corrupted. He was easily tricked by this, and now he is compelled to obey Egwilv's every secret command. Egwilv believes that the Prince of Wrath will eventually have the power to crush Orcus and Demogorgon, the most powerful demon lords. When that happens, Koschei will command the entirety of the Abyss, at which point Egwilv will seize that prize from her thrall, becoming the most powerful being in the cosmos. Egwilv is so good at what she does and secretive that no one suspects the connection to Koschei, except for Grazd, who sees the influence of some greater intellect in the Frost Giant's tactics. This pawn in Egwilv's game grows stronger with each passing year, and only by banding together could the Lords of the Abyss hope to stop him. However, by the time those always feuding entities decide to do so, it may be already too late. We also get a look inside the betrayal and relationship of Egwilv and Grazd. It is true that she imprisoned him, but as she first tore from him information and knowledge of the Abyss, she discovered that she could tolerate the presence of no one but Grazd. He alone was worthy of her attention. She began to count on Grazd during her years, the Dark Prince always seated beside her. And it is said Egwilv might have succumbed to the same desires she once wielded so cunningly, and when the Dark Prince actually betrayed her, it caught her by surprise, giving a human side to her, as she was tricked using the same tactics that she had to originally steal the tome from Zagig. When Grazd left and she was stripped of power, she was crushed. And Egwilv did not exactly seek out Grazd, but instead Grazd sought out her. He dragged her back to the Abyss for imprisonment, instead of what was said before, where she sought him. And when she was dragged back to the Abyss for what awaited her, a new understanding was born, along with another monstrous offspring. Egwilv would often be seen in public with the child, but such states were inhumanly brief, and Grazd took great pains to keep this new child's identities and whereabouts hidden from enemies. Grazd and Egwilv had come to an understanding that they loved nothing more than hating each other, and they hated nothing more than loving each other. To the dismay and detriment of the Dark Prince's consorts, Egwilv was set free to roam the halls of the Argent Palace and scheme at the side of her one-time prisoner, former lover, and recent captor. Her counsel and extraordinary knowledge of demonology guided Grazd's campaigns of manipulation and conquest. Grazd jealously set out to destroy any fiend that had trafficked with Egwilv in the past. As demented as it sounds, he viciously attacked Froz Urblu solely because the Demon Prince of Deception had also been Egwilv's prisoner, a privilege that Grazd no longer wished to share with anyone. Though because Egwilv and Grazd were forever wary of each other's manipulations, trust was in short supply between them. The couple often held fast purely to spite those that sought to sunder their dysfunctional bond. Numerous enemies sought to drive a wedge between them, fearing that if the Dark Prince and the Mother of Witches were finally united, they had the potential to dominate the Abyss layer by layer. It was the machinations of yet another demon in mortal form, Tourney the Merciless, who we saw in 2nd edition, that finally broke the depraved bonds between them. A cataclysmic battle raged through the Argent Palace, but neither Egwilv nor Grazd was willing to deliver a decisive blow. Instead, they each laid waste to the halls of priceless treasures, slew favored servants and concubines, and traded venomous barbs and unholy tongues. Each held some of his or her power in reserve, recalling their weakened states following their previous struggle. Grazd finally granted Egwilv safe passage, and as far as demonic separations go, this was as close to amicable as one could hope for. The only consequences of this extremely toxic relationship are the two spawns, Ayuz and the other child, who is said to be corruption incarnate. These two beings wander the plains, sometimes aided by their parents. And if this extremely unorthodox family ever united, the Abyss would surely become theirs. And finally we come to 5th edition, where Egwilv most likely reaches her greatest fame yet, but almost nothing is known about her. for she is featured on the cover of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, but Igwilv is not exactly featured as an enemy in any module, story, or lore. She is mentioned in the Wild Beyond the Witchlight adventure. The summary of this adventure is witches and hags. It is said there are 3 hags from the Hourglass Coven who are the adoptive sisters of Igwilv under Baba Yaga. Using an artifact called Igwilv's Cauldron, the hags have trapped an archfey named Zybilna in temporal stasis and carved up her fey domain among them. At the end of the story, they come across Igwilv's Cauldron with Zybilna trapped inside. If they free Zybilna, they will find her out to be Igwilv disguised as an alter ego. Though while Igwilv was a brilliant, calculating figure hardly prone to emotional outbursts, Zybilna allows her emotions to run rampant and is more likely to find herself in the grip of happiness, anger, or melancholy. This is the price she pays to exert control over the Feywild and impose her will on the domain of Prismeer. At the end of all of it, when the players save Zybilna, or Igwilv, she will either use a wish spell to repair the cauldron if it was destroyed, or offer the players a wish spell, an extreme power of a 9th level spell. The Demononomicon is also alive and well. Tasha has also written Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, introducing Tasha's Caustic Brew, Tasha's Mind Whip, and Tasha's Otherworldly Guise. And so while we don't get a lot of information about the end to Tasha's story, it seems that she might have had a bit of a redemption arc, becoming Zybilna. Nowhere in 5th edition does she try to destroy worlds, lead in armies from Greyhawk, capture any demon lords, but instead gifts the players items for saving her. She now lives in Prismeer, a domain of the Feywild that Zybilna now rules. Zybilna also introduces 3 laws. The rule of hospitality, which stated everyone was required to be welcoming and congenial to anyone that entered into their home. The rule of ownership, which forbade thievery or burglary of any kind. And the rule of reciprocity, which directed that anyone receiving a gift was expected to return the gesture in kind. If you failed to adhere to these, you were excommunicated. And so 5th edition, it doesn't seem like Tasha is Igwilv at all. In fact, we see the entire journey unfold. She began as Tasha, an adopted daughter under Baba Yaga, and left, becoming Igwilv, spending hundreds, maybe thousands of years trying to dominate Earth, trying to dominate the Abyss. And in 5th edition, we see that she is content to be Zybilna, living on the plane of Prismeer, having forged the Demononomicon and Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. This, of course, will not be the end of Tasha, Zybilna, or Igwilv's story. Each of the 3 of her personas have been very dangerous, powerful beings. And if she ever decides to become Igwilv again, or a being even more dangerous, without the limitations, she could dominate the Abyss, she could dominate the material, or all planes, if she set her mind to it. Thank you all for watching this Forgotten Realms on Tasha, Igwilv, Zybilna, whatever you want to call it. Let me know in the comments how you feel about the story, how you feel about her ending. I do like that they still have this character around and are expanding on more than just the Igwilv evil side, but they're also writing things like the Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and adventures like Wild Beyond the Witchlight. If you stayed this long, thank you so much. Please consider liking, commenting, subscribing down below. I appreciate any of the support, and that's it for me. Thanks, everyone.